Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining today. We are so excited for our next IterateOn event where great ideas come from. Thank you so much, and we're gonna get started. So just a couple of quick things. If any of you have joined us before, you all know these. So this will be a 55-minute event. It will be recorded and shared after the event, so keep an eye out for that early next week. We will have a presentation brought primarily to you by Mike Frazzini. As you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A section. Any comments you have, please send them to the chat. We will be answering questions at the end. There will be a wrap-up survey here after the webinar ends, so please let us know your thoughts. Your feedback is so helpful to us as we continue to improve these events for you. Any unanswered questions will be answered via email. So today I am so excited that we have Mike Frazzini leading this for us. He is our he's our chief data scientist and chief of the evaluation cloud here at Iterate AI. Before Iterate, he was CTO and SVP of operations for eBags. He and his team built highly innovative and world-class e-commerce platforms. Mike also has a master's of science in data science from UC Berkeley, which happens to be a rival school of mine, but we're still friends besides that. And he and his team won a highly prestigious award while there. So needless to say, Mike is going to just lead an awesome event today.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for attending today. Pretty exciting topic. I'm sure everyone probably knows Brian and John, but I'm gonna formally introduce Brian, Sathyanathan, and John Nordmark. I've had the privilege to work with John for many years at eBags, and with both John and Brian at Iterate now for many years also. First as a customer, where Iterate helped ebags.com with its innovation and double-digit growth, and it essentially paved the way for our 9-figure acquisition and exit in 2017, which was phenomenal. And John and Brian both have amazing entrepreneurial, technology, and leadership backgrounds. John is a leader at Samsonite, founder of ebags.com, as a widely respected thought leader in digital and e-commerce, and founder of Iterate AI with Brian. And Brian, as a member of the Apple secret products team that developed the first iPhone, and then later as an entrepreneur with several successful exits and co-founding Iterate AI with John. And I've been fortunate to work with many prolific ideators in my 30 years of experience in technology and digital innovation. But I can honestly say that John and Brian are both people who have generated more ideas, more good ideas and discoveries than anyone I've worked with. So it's very appropriate to be presenting this topic with their help today. We're very excited to share with you what we've learned about where good ideas come from. Iterate enables and accelerates innovation and digital transformation, but innovation and digital transformation doesn't even get off the ground without good hunches, ideas, and discoveries. Whether or not they drive big I disruptive innovations or little I sustaining innovations, We want to be more intentional about creating, capturing, cultivating, and capitalizing on good hunches and ideas. Iterate has designed a product to orchestrate ideas and ideation. And as part of that design and journey, we studied a lot about where good ideas come from. We discovered a gem in that journey, which is the book Where Good Ideas Come From by Steven Johnson. Johnson's the author of 12 books, many bestsellers, all highly rated, covering very interesting topics in science, technology, and history. He's a regular contributor to Wired, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times. He also serves on the advisory board of Medium and hosts a podcast about innovation in America. And in 2010, Johnson studied 200 of humankind's greatest ideas, discoveries, inventions, and innovations spanning over 600 years, and he synthesized them into key insights in his book, Where Good Ideas Come From. Now, I'm going to take you through a brief visual journey through those world-changing ideas and discoveries before we really get started here. With the possible exception of the wheel and fire, the list Johnson studied contains just about all of the biggest ideas and discoveries of humankind, like the printing press and double entry bookkeeping, which was apparently invented in 1400 by an Italian, no less. Heliocentrism, the fact that the earth revolves around the sun, discovered by Copernicus, actually in 1514, but I think he was afraid of being burned at the stake, and it really didn't get published until 1543. The microscope, the telescope, logarithms, ocean tides, pendulum and spring timepieces, calculus, dubbed the system of the world, independently and simultaneously discovered by Leibniz and Newton around 1690, the steam engine and the laws of gravity, photosynthesis, oxygen, and the lightning rod, the steamship and vaccines, the steam locomotive and the bicycle, the suspension bridge, the telegraph, and the first programmable computer, Charles Babbage's analytical engine, for which Ada Lovelace created the first computer program, the typewriter and steel making, the light bulb and the telephone, the automobile and human incubation, the airplane and Einstein's theory of relativity, assembly line manufacturing and superconductors, penicillin, discovered in error by Alexander Fleming in 1928, the television and the jet engine, the DNA double helix structure accredited to Watson and Crick in 1953, but really a lot of the credit should go to a person by the name of Rosalind Franklin, who perfected her X-ray crystallography and took photo 51, which was passed along to Watson before their discovery, and actually shows the structure, the transistor and the pacemaker, the graphical user interface, and the personal computer. And finally, the internet, the World Wide Web, and RNA splicing, which laid the groundwork for today's mRNA COVID vaccines. So Johnson studied a pretty amazing list of ideas and discoveries. He synthesized his analysis into a couple of key concepts and 6 patterns that you will learn about today. The first concept is the idea space, or adjacent possible, which in itself is an idea that embodies all of the doors of possibility that can be opened at a point in time. Johnson describes the adjacent possible as being as much about limits as it is about openings. He says major advances rarely break out of the adjacent possible. The history of progress is almost without exception a story of one door leading to another door, exploring the adjacent possible, one room at a time. He says the trick is to figure out ways to explore and experiment with the edges of possibility that surround you. He reminds us of the famous moment in the near catastrophic Apollo 13 mission, where the engineers and mission control dump all of the available parts on the table to create a life and mission saving solution. That space gear on the table defines the adjacent possible for the problem of building a working carbon scrubber on a lunar module. The keys to unlocking the doors in the idea space are to get more parts on the table. You can do this by understanding the patterns that most ideas have in common. The first pattern is the liquid network. And liquid networks are networks with dense and dynamic connections, storage, and spillover for hunches and ideas. Even though all of the words we use to describe an idea sound like a single event or a thing, like spark, flash, brainstorm, epiphany, and light bulb moment, an idea is actually a network of thousands of neurons firing in sync with each other inside your brain. Your brain is the perfect model of a liquid network in its size and density of connections, and in its plasticity, as it can easily form new patterns and be reconfigured. A city is another great example of a liquid network. Geoffrey West studied the innovativeness of cities and found an interesting phenomenon. Creativity and innovation, measured by patents, R&D spend, professionals and creative professions, followed a positive quarter power law. A metropolis 50 times bigger than a town was 150 times more innovative. This is called superlinear scaling, and shows why liquid networks lead to more ideation and innovation. The more connections, storage, spillover, and dynamic reconfiguration ability there is, exponentially higher innovation results. The second pattern is the slow hunch. The slow hunch is the raw element of ideation and innovation. Often it emerges as a half-baked notion in partial, incomplete forms. And fun fact, Ben & Jerry's, great brand, two of their most iconic flavors, one of my favorites, Cherry Garcia and Chubby Hubby, came from serendipitous submissions of ideas from their customers. The slow hunch can start out as a seemingly crazy or bad idea until it has a chance to connect with other hunches, simmer and bake over time, and emerge as a good idea. Tim Berners-Lee, or TBL, inventor of the World Wide Web, one of the most utilized inventions of all time, and also one of the best liquid networks, probably second only to the human brain, says he did not hatch the idea as a single light bulb going on epiphany or eureka moment. He described it as a process of accretion over 10 years, built on a swirling together of influences and ideas and realizations from many sides, from exploring 100-year-old encyclopedias as a child to an idle side project at work helping people keep track of their colleagues, to a deliberate attempt to build an information platform that could openly connect and share information across the planet. Like the World Wide Web, many good ideas originate as slow hunches that take shape over time through connections and networks. Capturing hunches, keeping them alive, and connecting them over time is how slow hunches evolve into good ideas. The third pattern is serendipity. Both the sprouting of a slow hunch and the blossoming of a slow hunch to something more substantial require serendipity. To emerge as a good idea, a slow hunch needs both a liquid network and a serendipitous connection with other hunches and ideas. On the surface, serendipity may sound like good luck, but hopefully we all know that good luck favors the prepared and the persistent. And there are ways to cultivate serendipity. Here are some great ways, many from the book and a few from our experience at Iterate. Making time for ideation and innovation is important. Google and 3M do this by allowing employees 15 to 20% creative time to explore their ideas. Resting and reflecting. So many hunches and ideas came from resting, reflecting, and thinking of something else. Reading remains an unsurpassed vehicle for the transmission of interesting new ideas and perspectives. Take creative walks. The history of innovation is full of stories of good ideas that occurred while people were out on a stroll. Showers and soaks in bathtubs are up on the list too. Hunches and ideas are fleeting and easily lost. It's important to capture them in all places. In a notebook, or maybe in an idea form on a smartphone that you probably always have handy. Embrace or accelerate diversity and inclusion. As diversity and inclusion bring different experiences and perspectives to the table, expanding the adjacent possible. Embrace randomness. You were always told not to talk to strangers, but when you get a chance to fly again, talk to that person next to you. And build and frequent serendipitous spaces. Serendipitous spaces can be anywhere: a coffee shop, a bookshop, a park, your local college or university. With me, it's hanging out with my dogs in the living room or going for a walk with them. And if you're focused on innovation, digital transformation, and business, like I think most of us are, the last two may be the most productive. Simple two. Ask your customers for their ideas, or launch an entrepreneur program where you challenge your associates and employees to come up with great hunches and ideas. Iterate can help. Now I'd like to turn it over to John for some of his thoughts and experiences on serendipity.
Yeah, and this isn't anything more than Mike's been saying, but I just ran across this article the other day, and it said that 72% of people have new ideas. Where else? In the shower. These shower ideas are the result of reflection as our brains make connections between information that we've already consumed. And so again, this goes with the slow hunch, with serendipity. Next slide, Mike. And in my life, I know I'm one of those people. The best place for me a lot of times, as crazy as it sounds, is the shower. But a lot of times it's also when I wake up in the morning. For some reason, there's a lot of dots that connect at that point. I love driving in the car by myself too, just wherever I'm going on an errand. For some reason, my mind opens up, and that's where dots start connecting again. Walking the dog, eating breakfast while working out, all these are good. And I don't know how many times it's also on a random phone call with Andrea, with Emily, with Brian, Dave, Mike. And all of a sudden, they say something and it's like, wow, I've never thought of that. And it makes things come together. So we've been involved, Iterate's been involved to these brainstorming sessions. And this is in red on this slide because as you look at the literature around how, and the research around how ideas are formed, rarely does any good idea come out of this big group brainstorming session. It's more likely to be in the shower. Mike?
Yeah, thanks, John. The fourth pattern is error. It's a pattern of making mistakes and being wrong, but rare is the good idea and discovery that isn't preceded by error. It's so prevalent that it's inherent in the scientific method, where two types of error, type 1, false positive, and type 2, false negative, are expected, predetermined, and measured against. Error and being wrong can drive you to unlock new doors in the adjacent possible, and it can also produce ideas and discoveries on its own. Alexander Fleming discovered the medical virtues of penicillin while the mold erroneously infiltrated a staph culture he had left open. And similarly, great inventions like the vacuum tube and pacemaker were outcomes of other failed experiments. The benefits of the pacemaker to reset normal heart rhythms were accidentally discovered. They were actually trying to develop a heart monitoring device. And Brian, I know you've got some interesting stories and experience on trial and speed and error that you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I'll tell you a funny story. It's really interesting, how we learn things by error. So this was I think in 2000, somewhere in the mid time frame, maybe 2000, early 2006 time frame. We were working on their secret iPhone product, right? So we were one of my responsibility was leading a team that connected built the security and the cryptography under the within the device. So it would basically work with only one carrier because we had an exclusive relationship with AT&T at that point. So typically when people start building these things, they end up using common well-known protocols. What I mean is,
and Brian, just for people on the phone, this is Apple's very first iPhone. Brian was on
Apple's
the team that
very
built
first
that.
iPhone. Yeah. So a lot of, thank you, John. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of companies who are building or OEMs of devices, they used very standard systems to do this. So we were also experimenting with what's available there, right? So we were in all these, put together secret buildings, and it wasn't very, nicely put together. So it was like a temporary structure. So we had like servers all powered with cords and so on. And then my teams were working on it, and they were testing these cryptographic systems. And I happened to, and then there was a cord that was going from one hardware device to another all across the office. And I across the lab. I came from a meeting because every day I had lots of meetings. So I came from a meeting and accidentally like walked over the cord and unplugged the power supply out of it completely, right? The whole thing just completely shut down, right? But then suddenly the engineers realized, oh my God, power loss can create a massive problem while this type of cryptographic transaction is happening, right? So they changed the protocol based on that learning, right? And then eventually we started building more and more and more stuff, and of course, we patented a lot of that stuff. So, and we can publicly talk about it. But it's really interesting that one single mistake, right? They were probably not very happy with their boss, turning their power off. But that allowed us to learn, and an accidental error actually allowed us to learn all the inherent mistakes, or like the vulnerabilities of what the platform has, right? So that was a really interesting practical example. And we've had that similar example here at Iterate as well. Arul is one of our head of engineering. We've had similar several examples like that for, while we were building our AI modules, we ended up like pumping in wrong set of data, and then like the model expects something and we put something else, and we suddenly realize, oh my God, we messed up. And that allows us to learn a lot more, right? I think so. Error is a big part of this scientific learning process, right? It's always good. The other thing that's also interesting is there are abstract ideas that come in your mind, like connecting the different dots and come up with larger ideas. But at the same time, if you also have to keep trying things, right? And the error happens when you keep trying things, right? And that's a big part of the invention process, right? And Mike, one other thing I want to quickly go to, I love that Steven Spielberg comment on slide 29, right? Where he talks about all good ideas start as bad ideas initially, right? It's a very interesting comment, right? Because when I spent a few years in the corporate VC space, right? So startups walk into the office and pitch. You hear pitches every day, right? I don't know, like 5 pitches, 6 pitches, and then even like while John and Nordmark and I, we were in the incubator before we started Iterate. We were in the board, and we used to hear, I don't know, 45 pitches in a week, John, something like that, right? 45, 50 pitches in a week, right? So entrepreneurs come in really passionate about their ideas, right? But then as you hear more and more pitches, in your mind, you have frameworks, because if you are in the investment community, or if you are you have built frameworks, right? So, and then some of these ideas that you're thinking, this is completely unscalable. This guy is nuts. I mean, never gonna happen, right? But guess what? Some of the ideas that they pitched us in 2011 or 2012 or 2010 are actually big unicorns today, right? It's not the same entrepreneurs who did it. It's completely different. But then what happened is, things that are in your mind and in your parents that you think are unscalable are actually scalable as the industry, the required technologies come into place, right? That's, I think it's important, because we ourselves, every pattern in our head is not a fixed pattern, because we are in a moving world.
Yeah, that's awesome, Brian. Thank you. And it ties into some of these other patterns we're about to talk about as well. And just to kind of close out on the error pattern, though, I completely agree with you and agree that, errors, it's a natural part of ideation and discovery. And while you shouldn't try to engineer error, of course, you shouldn't quit, when you inevitably encounter it, because, discovery is almost always right around the corner. The only real mistake is not to make the same errors multiple times, right? And you can avoid that by tracking your ideas and, experimental, tracking your outcomes and following good scientific methods, for sure. And a person who never makes a mistake never tried anything new. Great quote by Einstein there. And the fifth pattern is something called acceptation. It comes from the world of biology, where a feature or trait occurs for a specific use and then evolves for an entirely different use. The textbook example is feathers that first emerged on dinosaurs for warmth, but later evolved into key parts of a wing structure that enabled flight. If error and serendipity unlock new doors in the adjacent possible, acceptations help us explore new possibilities that lurk behind those doors. And there are many great examples of acceptation in the history of good ideas and innovation. Here you can see features of the ancient wine press being used in Gutenberg's printing press. And similarly, Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace and many others would utilize the feature of punch cards in the programming of the first computers, a feature which Jacquard developed for semi-automated weaving looms many decades prior. And the sixth and final pattern is arguably the most important one, but it's the platform. A platform is a system of systems, standards, and resources where ideas are quickly built upon pre-existing parts, resulting in functionality and performance greater than the sum of those parts. If the liquid network is the connectivity and mortar for good ideas, that platform is the foundation. A platform exists and grows from many doors and rooms being opened in the adjacent possible. One of so many examples is GPS. Three guys by the name of Geyer, Weifenbach, and McClure originally designed a system to help US submarines launch Polaris missiles anywhere at sea. Of course, it never occurred to them that someday someone would use their platform to help people figure out where to have lunch. And many other hunches, ideas, and systems combined into platforms so Google Maps could emerge. And it's also very similar, and explains why three people, three fairly young, smart people could build YouTube in 6 months, while an army of expert committees, electronics companies, and so many others took 20 years to make HDTV a reality. Of course, Iterate is developing great solutions for ideation. I want to spend just a couple minutes showing them off. At Iterate, we enable and accelerate innovation and digital transformation. And we do this through our experienced and expert iterators, but also through our AI-infused open innovation ecosystem that consists of 2 cloud-based platforms that are purpose-built to drive programmatic and intentional innovation outcomes. The Evaluation Cloud for innovation evaluation, and the Execution Cloud powering rapid innovation experimentation to production execution with the Interplay platform. We'd be happy to arrange a deep dive on how our entire platform can help you with innovation and digital transformation. But I'd like to briefly highlight our product for idea orchestration we've built to help companies capture hunches, connect and cultivate them into good ideas, and to capitalize on them with innovation solutions and execution. Idea orchestration features challenge, feedback, and dashboards that can help you build idea landing pages and intake forms that are highly branded and engaging. Several of our members are successfully using these to create liquid networks, capture slow hunches, create serendipitous connections, and expose useful acceptations for externally targeted idea challenges directed to customers or suppliers, and for internally focused entrepreneurship programs which are directed to the organization as part of a cultural focus on ideation and innovation. Our open dashboards provide a branded, visual, and interactive experience to idea contribution, bringing it to life. We're also applying AI to idea contributions with topic modeling and connecting hunches and ideas through our idea genome, which you can visually see and interact with here in the dashboard in a fun network graph. Our goal is not only to ramp up engagement for idea challenges and entrepreneurship programs, but to also convey the key message that contribution is a cornerstone of the idea journey. As we have learned, the contribution of the hunch and letting it simmer in a liquid network over time, while serendipitously connecting with other hunches and ideas, is crucial for intentional ideation.
Yeah. So, Mike, there is an interesting thought here, right? Because what's interesting here is that in the set of slides that you showed originally, like there were individuals who were inventing, right? And then they were experimenting, and then there were a group of people who were experimenting, right? Now you are having machines supercharging people's thoughts, right? In two ways. One is basically taking people's thought and allowing these ideas and submissions into clearly clustered categorization, right? Because sometimes it's very hard to organize thoughts. So the kind of, clustering the thoughts. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, if a lot of people invent together, especially through platforms and others, how do you actually join ideas together, which I think is another area, I think machines also, right? But it's very interesting to see the evolution, right? Because this book covers the single one human inventing and then a group of humans inventing. I think we are talking about the next level of that, where can you put a machine to the group of humans, which gets even a bigger paradigm, right? That's where the world is kind of going towards.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And he talks a lot too, as you know, in the book about how he breaks all the 200 inventions down by, whether they were sort of more individually or small team oriented or more group oriented. And they're predominantly, especially from like 1800 on, much obviously more complex, requires a lot more thought and input and hunches to come together. And with some of the more advanced inventions like the internet and the jet engine and things that came after 1800, that those are predominantly attributed to much bigger teams and enterprises. And I think that's exactly what we're focused on here. And just one more quick slide on our idea orchestration product here, where we're showing off here now, our branded idea and challenge landing pages, forms, and dashboards that we just showed. They're backed with an evaluation admin that has an evaluation dashboard, custom evaluation criteria, and team configuration for sifting through and scoring ideas with various configurable team groups, features designed to limit bias, like blind submissions in evaluation scoring, where you don't see the team average scores until you submit your own scores, and ability for comments and interactive comment threading with submitters via email. We've really built a product here that treats ideation like an information network that I think you're describing too, Brian. The solution to the suggestion box black hole. And Johnson actually talks about this in his book. He says, suggestion boxes feel like a black hole. You drop your idea in the slot and never hear about it again. But information networks can do a masterful job of tapping both individual and collective intelligence. The individual employee has a provocative and useful hunch, and the group helps complete the hunch by connecting it to other ideas that have circulated through the system and helps separate that hunch from so many of the other hunches by voting them to the top. So before we get into questions and discussions, there's a few more key insights from Johnson's work and our own experiences that we want to share. The first big one, and I'd love your input on this too, John and Brian, is but the key here is that ideas and ideation thrive in openness. And we're often better served by connecting ideas than we are at protecting them. So many ideas, as I mentioned, come out of really, especially since 1800, and you can see this in Johnson's work, enterprises and much bigger groups collaborating and connecting hunches in an open way, in an open way as possible to to produce amazing discoveries and good ideas.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. See, I think what's also interesting in this is a very helpful, the whole concept of sharing versus trying to protect them, because I think that the specifics of the idea could be protected, but it's always good to share. It's a valuable lesson for both entrepreneurs as well as executives, right? When entrepreneurs think of new ideas, the first thing is, oh my God, he will steal my idea, right? So but at the same time, as you speak and discuss more and more about the idea gets crystallized, because others you talk about the idea with, they are able to give you feedback and then also show you places where you have not thought about it, right? And the same thing I think happens in the corporate also to a large degree. Like, people have ideas, but the question is, if I start talking about it, will my peer go and build it faster than me, right? So a lot of, even this happens in Silicon Valley all the time, right? And the question, so I think that the world is going towards a place where it's better to talk and discuss through ideas, and there has to be a harvesting process of ideas, it's better to talk than actually to protect the idea, right? Because in that way you can get better validation, because that's why if you look at the current, all the current thought process that's out there, like, do product market fits, do validations, because the idea has to, the more and more validations the idea gets, it gets better, right? But at the same time, one of the things to realize is, sometimes if you talk to 100 people, you may actually suddenly lose faith in your idea too, because that's another problem. Sometimes, because of all these fast failures, great idea often actually poses itself as a fast failure, right? So as a inventor, that's an interesting part to think about. Like, is your idea a sustaining great idea, or it's actually a fast failure because you spoke to 100 people and 85 of them said this is a bad idea,
Yeah.
right? So those are things to think about. Those are difficult questions. There are no trivial silver bullet answers to them.
No, it's true. And the other, one of the other, there's so many interesting things in the book, but one of the other interesting things too is Johnson, again, analyzed all these ideas and discoveries and found that the majority of them came out of not commercial institutions, but mostly academic institutions, and some of them government. But it was more about people being open, focused on solving really big problems and opportunities for society. Like, some of the biggest inventions we have came out of that, and that sort of openness. So that's a really interesting key insight. And another one, John definitely talked to this in his point in serendipity, but the brainstorming sessions, are limited, right? They can work, but they're limited to a point in time in a certain amount of context, right? So in engineering speak, your surface area for serendipity is highly constrained. But it's not like they're not necessarily useful. He also in the book talks about how and to your point, Brian, how important it is to collaborate around a conference table and share your ideas, verbally and with colleagues and other interested parties that can also be part of that serendipitous connection. So, brainstorming can be useful, but it's very limited.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I agree. One point that's really interesting in this journey is sometimes, organizations do like a forced brainstorming with, post-it notes, and everybody comes and puts their post-it notes, and then the highest, and then score the post-it notes. So a lot of times I think forced brainstorming actually has a negative effect, because eventually, the loudest voices or the influencers kind of win, right? So I think it's important to kind of realize that. And also, some of the companies have built pretty interesting practices. I think Apple does a good process, and even Amazon, the whole writing the press release ahead of time and having everybody read it, right? If you have enough press releases submitted, people can actually read it, and it's not a forced brainstorming, because people write it on their own thinking, right, at their own time, and then people read it. And so I think there are, rubber hits the road, several methods to do it, but brainstorming often doesn't always produce the greatest result, right? Especially the forced brainstorming.
Yeah.
Related to this too, back when eBags was getting going, when I quit my job at Samsonite to start eBags, I bet 99% of people told me that I'd made a big mistake. And I came to this opinion that an idea is really only an idea when no one agrees with you. And then it's through talking with people where you start making it incrementally a little better and a little better and a little better, and people provide their ideas, and then gradually, it really comes together. But it is a gradual thing, and that's why these brainstorming sessions, I guess why this comment is made here. But I still agree, like, an idea is often, the best ideas are when no one even understands what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The half-baked slow hunch, but it turns out to be, world changing. Another key insight, is that isolated eureka moments are rare. The Big Bang theory of ideas with eureka and light bulb epiphanies are very rare, and that's just a common theme across almost all the ideas. I think including the laws of gravity. It wasn't just discovered from an apple falling from a tree. And then, sustaining the slow hunch is important, and collecting it, capturing it, letting it cultivate is crucial. And, another takeaway I had reading through this book and all the history of inventions is that, that I think I've heard the lament that all the good ideas have already been invented. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's the more things that get invented, the more the velocity increases through denser networks and more and more useful platforms. So, it's that notion is certainly not supported by the history and velocity of innovation. And with that, I think we can open it up to any questions or further discussion on ideation and where good ideas come from.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike, John, and Brian, for all that. So we do have a couple questions. First off, I have always found that good ideas would bubble up to the surface everywhere I worked, but executive support and lack of funding models killed just about every good idea. How do you address these obstacles with executive leadership?
Yeah, I would certainly say that there has to be a culture of ideation, an openness to ideation to begin with. I mean, that kind of environment certainly doesn't sound like it. And, of course, ideas can lead to more work, but that's the opportunity, right? And so it can lead to more work, more investment, but I think it's important to have that, to try to establish that culture that, there's always 1,000 operational things to be doing in the job jar. And, but it's also important if you want to, transform and survive in many cases, and definitely thrive in others, to have that constant continuous improvement ideation flow. And so, that's another area where I would say a entrepreneurship program can really help. I mean, it can start to even just visually with the open dashboard show people that there's a lot of great thought, and executives too. There's a lot of great thought out there that they get some visibility into that.
Yeah, and also, Mike, another thing that can also help, especially in organizations like this question mentions, if there is no defined plans or structured for harvesting ideas, right? One is, of course, the programs like Entrepreneur can help. The other thing that is like informally, one way one or two methods that can help you. One of the ideas that I've seen in the past is where people use snowballing effects, right? So what it means is, you have a great idea, you get a colleague of yours working with you to buy in on the idea, and you basically do a sell job over. And if it snowballs enough, right? If it continues to snowball enough, then eventually it'll come. I mean, in fact, this has happened in Google. There are true stories where some engineer had an idea, he couldn't quite get it through, and then went through and created a whole snowballing effect, and it reached the top very quickly, right? So you could actually do kind of as long as it's done in a very positive way, you could sort of create an influential snowballing effect, because within organization, the snowball pattern is a very powerful pattern, because if enough people start talking about it, people will start paying attention, right? It's just very similar to social networks. Can you create a network of enough people, influencers following you, right? Or subscribing to your concept.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some great stories too at executives at Blockbuster and Kodak, and those are always fun to review too, and you can see what happened to those companies.
Absolutely. All right, so Shay, I see your hand is up, so would you like to ask your question?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Shay.
Hi. First, thanks, guys. This is awesome. I want you guys to do a podcast every week. But my biggest question was, I love the culture of people generating new ideas and new approaches. But what I hate is like when you come down to money and time, and I mean, focus is where we try to sort of quail the ideas. But how do you do it so in a way that, I mean, I guess I like the idea of having people have to create enough like momentum around it with other people on their team about the idea. But how do you guys do it so that you're not squashing the culture of creating new ideas, but still keeping focused on what you need to do with limited resources?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think there's a couple of things, right? Like, so first off, and it gets to the other question too, it's like removing some of the demotivators around ideation, right? And creating, if you will, safe spaces for ideation, and that's what we've set out to do with our idea challenges and entrepreneurship programs, and the visualization of the dashboard and the contribution is key, because that's a big part of the message. That's a big part of the learnings that Johnson talks about is, it's not always the outcome of the hunch that is most valuable. It's the hunch itself. It's like the generation of the good hunch that can go into the idea soup, if you will, and simmer and bake and connect with all the other hunches, that is every bit as valuable, and leads to ultimately valuable outcomes. But that's part of it, is sort of establishing that culture of ideation. And everyone has 99 problems, but ideation isn't one, and they're always focused on all these different operational things. I get it. I've been there for many years, but we always felt, and the great thing about eBags, right, from the very beginning, we survived and thrived by ideation in an e-commerce industry that was just burgeoning and exploding and so dynamic. You had to, from the get-go, had to constantly invent and drive new ideas. So we were sort of ingrained in that culture. But we did things like create spaces like a hackathon. We would have 2 hackathons a year, where everybody would sort of, it's like the make time idea with Google and 3M, but everyone would more or less drop all but the most critical operational activities for a week and help cultivate, brainstorm, and generate good ideas, and then try to prototype them. And some amazing initiatives came out of that. There's no doubt in my mind that I could rattle them all off, but there was a bunch of initiatives that came out of that led to eBag's success and exit. So, there's no, I think, one easy answer, but I think in general, sort of recognizing that, yep, everybody has their operational focus. At the same time, ideation is so important. Providing visibility into that, openness into it, and a space for it is key in my experience.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so next question. In your experience, what are some good ways to empower talented employees to contribute their ideas and encourage them to keep working on them?
I think that when we talked about removing some of the demotivators, right, in the culture, and if you can do that, which is a big task, then you can, I think, focus on some of the rewards. But so often, and you see this in the book again, so often the reward is just being able to build cool new things. That was the biggest reward of all, I think, for all of the great ideas and features that we did at eBags. And the key there as a leader and And someone who's involved with the culture is making sure that recognition's in place. I think is like, that's in my experience the single biggest thing. John or Brian, I don't know.
One reason we built one reason I kind of like that ideation platform that Mike showed earlier, the entrepreneur platform, which can also be exposed externally. But the reason I like that entrepreneur platform is it's an outward sign to the company that we want your ideas. We want you to participate. And we have one company right now planning to roll that out to 16,000 stores. They want the ideas from every employee working in those stores. And to me, it's that outward, it's extending the hand to all those people in the company that you mean something to us, you value, we think your thinking is important to us. Please give us your thoughts. On the flip side of that, though, the other thing is you have to respond to those people when they offer ideas. And if you don't do that, and then I think you lose momentum. But without taking that first step and making it really easy for people to participate, as executives, as the leaders of the company, you're not really building that culture that cultivates that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with John, because I think the thing is, a lot of times organizations start programs and then suddenly they don't follow through. So it's important for the leaders to, because if employees, once they figure out this is just one of those forms we have to fill, then suddenly the motivation drops out. So it's important to make it a very, very intentional, because that's why innovation is intentional, right? It's like everything in a human life, like relationships, everything we do, right? You have to have an intentional step to do that. So I think it's also it's important for the leadership to show intentionally that we care. I mean, this is not another thousands of forms you have to fill every day, right? So I think that's an important part of that journey of encouraging people. The other, I think, is also setting up the expectation from the very beginning, right? Because sometimes what happens, I've seen especially here in the Valley, I've seen like people get very tied up and very passionate with their ideas, right? So you also get into the scenarios where, my idea wasn't picked, right? And now I'm demotivated. Next time I'm not going to participate in your program, right? So I think it's also setting up the expectation in the very beginning, right? This is a very fluid exercise. We are gathering lots and lots of ideas. Some ideas
related to that, going back to eBags again, and I'm sorry but eBags it grew its conversion rate by like 10 times over about 6-year period. And it was recognized as one of the top 10 converting sites in the whole internet by 2007. And it was a pure play. It was the only pure play on that list, outside of Amazon. But it was special. And the reason that happened was because we took ideas from anybody. We did not care where they came from. We asked for everyone to contribute thoughts on how the conversion rate could increase on the website. And then we just basically evaluated them by, what do we think the impact would be? How hard would it be to build it? And, how hard would it be to test it? And we built a test environment to make sure we could take those into test. And we probably ran, I don't know what it was hundreds of tests. And one thing that we also said is that, well, I used to say this, is I know one thing, I'm only right half the time. And we would take bets. In other words, if someone came to me with an idea and I had a judgment that I wanted to make on that, I knew that I'm likely to be wrong in my judgment. And the only way we're going to know what is really a good idea is to give it a shot with consumers. And I would say that eBags was masterful at that in those, at least in the years that I was there.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, absolutely, John. Yeah. So that's the thing. I think that there is a expectation that is set that, ideas, that a lot of ideas come in and the market tests your idea, or the industry will validate your idea, right? And then the idea is to continue to keep a fluid environment to keep ideas coming in, right? And then even if somebody's idea is not picked, continue to encourage them to keep thinking, because just as in the world, it's always a game of numbers, right? Like in a traditional angel investor has to invest like 30 deals before he turns around a really great deal. Same thing in venture capital, same thing in hedge funds, right? Every industry is like that, right? So I think it's important for us to sort of, create a lot of, even like Amazon Prime is a classic example. For several years, it didn't create any profit. Xbox was bundled for, at revenue or low, at cost or lower than the cost for a long time, right? So I think that's an important part to realize in this journey. Back to you, Mike.
You can make and cultivate your own serendipity. And I think that'd probably be a good place to leave it as we're wrapping it up here on time, I think, unless Brooke, there's more questions or things we want to cover.
Yep, we do have a few unanswered questions, but we will answer those via email after. So if your question did not get answered, don't worry, we will be getting back to you. So I just want to say again, thank you so much to everyone who joined us. We look forward to seeing you guys next time, and we continue to iterate on with you all. So
thank you.
thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.